Darren Aronofsky, Daniel Bird, all today's moderators.
Good afternoon, Armenia. So, it's a cliche to say that a director like Darren Aronofsky needs no introduction, but I'm going to give an introduction anyway. Over 20 years, Darren has directed some really remarkable performances. Ellen Bernstein in Requiem for a Dream, playing an amphetamine addict. Mickey Rourke's on and off screen comeback in The Wrestler, and arguably the most challenging role of Natalie Portman in Black Swan. He's a filmmaker which has focused and developed a way of filming extremes, bodily extremes, mental extremes. We've seen migraine headaches on screens in Pi, kind of amphetamine addicts, something which was a shock, certainly for me when I first saw these films 20 years ago. He's a director who's experimented with genre, often making films between genres, and also a filmmaker who has consistently over the last 20 years made some provocative and challenging films. I'm shocked to think that Mother, for example, came out to the studio last year. I think it's a real achievement to push an audience, a mainstream audience, and challenge them, regardless of the critical and commercial fallout. I think this is a great opportunity to ask Darren directly about his own feelings about the films and also some of the practical aspects. I'm going to begin by asking a few questions before opening it up to you. I want to begin at the beginning. My first encounter with your cinema was exactly 20 years ago at the Colle Vivari Film Festival. I remember seeing a still from Pi and reading this description about Talmudic scholars, the stock exchange and maths, and I thought, this is my Eraserhead. This is a midnight movie for my generation. So I want to ask you, why did you choose to make this film on these subjects? Where did it all come from? I think actually Eraserhead was a big influence, actually. Pi started off with our limitations. I had been trying to make a feature film for about 4 or 5 years and couldn't quite figure out how to put it all together. I had a different idea before Pi, but it was more expensive. And eventually I just got fed up with trying to raise money. So I started to think, okay, what can I definitely raise? If I talk to every single person in the world that I know now and I needed to raise some money, I figured that $20,000 US was not a crazy amount of money. So I knew I had a $20,000 box, and then I started to think about what could fit in that box. And I think over those 4 or 5 years I had been trying to make a feature film, I had started to collect all of these different ideas and stories that were of interest. And I always talk about Pi very much as a tapestry, meaning I took a lot of different threads and ideas and sort of sewed them all together. And I think that's kind of become, a lot of my work has sort of had that tradition.
Now, when I first saw Pi, I thought this was great, but it could well be a one-off. How on earth are you going to follow that? And you followed it with Requiem for a Dream. What was it like working with the author of the book, Hubert Selby Jr., and how did you translate those complex mental states into cinema?
Well, what was amazing about the novel Requiem for a Dream is that it was very cinematic. What Hubert Selby Jr. was able to do was take that conversation that someone has in their head when they're an addict and visualize it. And what he did so beautifully is he told 2 different stories. He told the story of 3 children, 3 kids, and a much more traditional story of heroin addiction. And then he took this older lady who was addicted to a dream and ultimately addicted to getting skinny and getting on television. And he showed how the same type of conversation goes on in your head, so that quitting cigarettes or quitting chocolate or quitting heroin
it's the same conversation. I mean, some of them clearly are more difficult to quit than others, but that same conversation about, oh, you know, if I just have a little bit, it'll be okay. No, I shouldn't. And that debate we have back in our heads. So he was able to really illustrate that in words that inspired me with images. And, you know, he was old at the time. Selby was probably, I don't know, he was born in, I don't know, 1910, 1920, he's an old guy. And he had, when he was a teenager, he had tuberculosis, and they took out 2/3 of his lung. So he lived for about 75 years with 1.25 lungs. And when he was in the hospital dying as a teenager, because he was in a hospital bed for about 2 years, he realized that if he was to die right now, that his whole life would be a waste. And then he realized that he didn't want that to happen. So it gave him the courage to start to do something with his life, and he started to write. Unfortunately, while he was in that bed, they put him on lots of painkillers, and he became an addict and eventually a junkie for most of his adult life. But in the 70s, he started to get sober, and I think Requiem for a Dream was his sort of analysis of addiction. And so he was able to, then the rest of his life he spent actually saving people from their addictions. He was a huge sponsor for AA and NA, and lots of people committed and dedicated to him. And he was also a crazy movie fan. So when we finally did make the movie and it all came together, it was one of the greatest gifts was having this master writer be really happy with the final product.
The way that you express this addiction is through incredibly complex and elaborate camera work and also editing. And my question is, to what degree did you find the film during the shooting and the editing?
I do a lot of homework, and I have a real perception very, very early on of what the movie is going to be. And so I know going in what I want every day. I think a film is made 3 times, though. You make it in the screenplay version. You know, when you make the screenplay, you visualize it in one way, and then you do it when you're shooting. The film becomes something else because you're working with actors, and they're not exactly how you want them to be, and you have to figure out how to work with them so that what they can give is the best they can give for that material, and that always changes it. And then the third time is completely in the editing room. You completely, can revisit it. But I think the way I shoot, things are so specific that luckily they can't be put together another way. When I was doing Noah, at a certain point, the studio, it was a very expensive movie, and the studio got really terrified of what the film was, so they tried to take it away and turn it into something else, but it just didn't work because it was so specific about how we shot it. So the film ultimately, it's sort of one movement, but it's constantly evolving and changing.
From your very first film, feature film, Pi, you'd established a kind of hardcore of collaborators, Clint Mansell on the soundtrack, Matthew Levatic on the photography. Could you talk about the importance of these collaborators and their role in your films?
Well, I think film, I wish filmmaking was more of an art, and sometimes it's an art, but a lot of the time it's, bureaucracy and taking care of people, worrying about safety, worrying about money, worrying about time. You only get to do a little bit of art. But to do that art, you need to bring in a lot of other incredible artists because it's a huge collaboration. It's kind of, I guess, being a director is sort of being a conductor of an orchestra. You need strings, and you need brass, and you need percussion, and everyone has to work together as one team. So it's really great when you can get a band together that can play together very well. And it's not always, it's like a marriage. It's not always a perfect harmony. At one point, me and Maddie, my DP, had a divorce after The Fountain, and we didn't talk for a couple of years, but then we got back together on Black Swan. So you go through a lot of these types of of movements. But you just try to find people that are, well, I look for people that are not just craftspeople, but that are artists, that want to take their work and push it to the furthest that they can, you know.
One of the great things about festivals like this is that you get to see films at the cinema, and one of those films is The Fountain, a film which I think really has to be seen at the cinema. Mythology plays a very strong role in your films, especially biblical subject matter as well, beginning with Pi. Could you talk about the role of mythology in your films, particularly in terms of the storytelling process?
Did I do all right with that question in the last time? Okay, good. Just don't want to make sure I offend anyone, because it's a religious country. You know, I think I'm attracted to the stories in the Bible, because I think the power of them is that they are stories. As a storyteller, that's, you know, we're trying to make emotional reactions by telling stories. We're trying to connect ourselves as one species, as not just one species, but as one planet, connected to all the living beings on this planet. And that's the power of cinema. That's why you can see a film out of Armenia, you can see a film from Iran, you can see a film from Brooklyn, and it doesn't matter if it's a 5-year-old girl in Tehran in White Balloon, or, you know, it's an 80-year-old guy in Scotland. It's what makes great cinema is that human emotion is universal. It translates through all languages. And so everyone can watch a film and feel it in the same way. The reason that Russell Crowe is a genius actor is because he can do one thing with his like eyelid, and every single person on the planet knows exactly what he's feeling. So I forgot how I got back to the Bible, but I will get there. But so it comes down to these stories, and what's exciting to me about the Bible is there are these ancient stories that belong to all of us on this planet. They belong to every single person. I don't care which of the 3 major religions or not that you're part of, it's part of world culture. And the reason that these stories keep being told is because they're great stories. And what makes them powerful is not if they happen, not where they happen, not who they belong to. What makes them powerful is what they mean to us now. So I was talking earlier about the story of Icarus. We all know the story of Icarus. Can you translate Icarus to everyone? How do you say Icarus? Yeah. How do you say it in Armenian?
Same word.
Same word, but pronunciated Icarus. So if you hear the word Icarus, you know immediately the story, right? We know the message of the story instantly. But we don't sit there and we don't fight over if someone really put wax and wings on their arms and flew too high to the sun. But with a single word, I can relate to everyone can get the message. So instead of fighting over did it happen, did it didn't happen, who did it belong to, there's power in that story. And so I think there's incredible power in those stories, and especially those early stories of the Bible in Genesis. And that we can use them to look at our lives now and our reality now. So when I did Noah, for instance, Noah in the Bible is about a man who saved all the animals because the earth was filled by the evil of man. That's the words in the Bible. The earth was filled with the evil of man. And so God told Noah to save the animals. Now, how you can't relate to that to what's going on right now, while as humanity, we're completely destroying all the environments on the planet and wiping out all the animals on the planet, and how you can't connect that while our sea levels are rising, and Yerevan had the worst heat wave in its history 2 weeks ago. I think there's just a message that's very timely for us. And the Pope has been talking about it a lot now as well. And I think we can look back on these stories and use them in ways to help us move forward as a planet.
Relate just one last question about The Fountain. The film famously, or rather infamously, didn't go too well down with some critics or audiences. I have a question about whether you think, if the film was conceived of as an art house movie of about $2-3 million, do you think if it was made like that, with the same structure, the same form, it would have been received better, and the way that maybe you're not allowed to do this on a big budget?
I mean, I do it a lot. For the Fountain, there was an original version of the Fountain that was a $90 million version, and then we eventually made it for 30. So that would have been a real disaster if we made it for that. But I don't know, it's like, you can't worry about the commercial success of a film. You can never know. After I made The Wrestler, which was won the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival, and went on to make a lot of money around the world and get nominated for a bunch of Oscars. I was trying to put together Black Swan, and for very little amount of money. And I had Natalie Portman, Mila Kunis, and Vincent Cassel, 3 international movie stars, and I couldn't get the money. Everyone was like, horror fans don't like ballet, and ballet fans don't like horror. So everyone was like, no, literally every single company in town, and I had to go and beg, truly beg someone for money for that movie, and then I made them really fucking rich. So you never know what a movie is going to be. You never know. That's the bottom line. You know, I think The Fountain, more than any of my films, I think means a lot to a lot of people in a very deep way. And my prediction is the same thing happens with Mama in 10 years. You know, for me, those were my 2 children that were most hated at birth, but in time, they turn into beautiful adults.
Do you think that has something to do with the way distribution's set up at the moment, and the way that there's so much pressure to make film money instantaneously, the way that, like, 2001 is having its 50th anniversary, and that film famously had like a year of gestating before becoming a kind of...
Yeah, I mean, look, it's very, very difficult because things are super, super quick, and they have to make money really, really quickly.
Just one general question before opening it up to the audience. Who is your audience?
I have no idea. Anyone who will watch my films. I really don't. I mean, what do you mean?
Do you, when you're actually making a film, I mean, are you writing to someone in specifically?
I don't think so. That's a good question. I don't think I'm really thinking about who's watching. I'm thinking about, I mean, I am. I'm always thinking about the audience, but I have more of an abstract. I'm trying to, I think I want people who want to see something different, and want to be challenged, and are kind of bored of Marvel movies. Which means no one, because everyone keeps going to every freaking Marvel movie.
We never put that box on audience research. I want to see something different. You yourself had a kind of run-in with superhero franchise movies, but you also said, interestingly, that you thought that Noah was, in fact, a kind of a superhero movie. Could you elaborate on that, please?
Well, I think the Bible stories are the original superhero films, and in many ways, the new Bible stories are these superheroes. They're these new types of Greek gods, except they don't have enough flaws. That's the big problem with these characters, is they're all immortal. It's a problem.
Batman's miserable.
That's why he's probably the most interesting.
Does anyone have any questions?
I just will ask you to have a questions, but by microphone. We need to, because the translation. Խնդրեմ միկրոֆոնով հարցերը տակ միայն, որ կարողանան, and Daniel, can you give there's a young girl who wants the question.
Շնորհակալություն։ Ես ուզում էի հարցնել մի փոքր մի փոքր կբացահայտեք ձեր դերասանների հետ աշխատելու տեխնիկան։ Շնորհակալ։
She was asking about how to work with actors. I think every actor requires their own experience. They all have their own technique. And I think the job of the director is to figure out how to make an actor feel comfortable. And that every actor is completely different. So in pre-production, it's about creating trust between yourself and the actor so that they can feel free to fully express themselves, that they can take chances. Because what happens with actors is when they open up, they become a beautiful flower. But then the more work they do, they get more and more burnt because suddenly they do work that is embarrassing because the film around it doesn't support them. And so you have to promise an actor that when they open up and show their heart, that you're never going to embarrass them. I mean, you might show emotionally something that is embarrassing to them as people, but as a performer, they'll be proud of themselves. So that's the big challenge. When you start working with experienced actors, they get afraid to sometimes really, really go and do something new or something different or something challenging. So you have to somehow show them that they'll be safe.
Okay, there's a young boy who wants to ask a question, and we will give them a chance. And then next, I want to see the. Okay.
Thank you. My question is about a common theme in your filmography, and that is obsession. Usually, characters in your films are obsessed in such levels that it leads them to self-destruction. So I want to ask you, how did you find that topic? How did you fall in love with that? And what motivates you, or if it's a specific person that motivates you to tell such stories? Thank you.
I don't know. You might have to ask my therapist.
Խնդրում եմ վերջում կարմիր զգեստով եկեք հերթը կպահենք եստերից բոլորը տեսնեն կարմիր զգեստով դուք խնդրեմ.
Yeah, thank you. I'm quite sure that each of us, no matter if we know about it, if we have come to that point or not, have some mission in this universe and some call. I just wonder if you see film directing as your call in this universe, and what made you to understand that language that is so common for each nation and every people in the world, emotional language, as you mentioned. Thank you so much.
I kind of stumbled into filmmaking. I didn't know what a filmmaker was when I was a kid. There wasn't so many stories. There wasn't so many film festivals. There wasn't really a path of independent film leading to Hollywood. So I didn't really know about it. When I got to college, I remember the first 2 years I was at university, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and I was terrified that I would never find what I wanted to do. But I had a roommate who was an artist, and he would draw all day and get straight A's, and then I would write papers that would not do too well, and I was be in the library, and I was like, you know what, there's something wrong, I should start doing some art classes. And so I started to do some art, and then I stumbled into filmmaking that way. And when I started to cut film, when I started to sit in the edit room and actually put image and sound together, and then to do surprising cuts, I got an excitement that I hadn't had before. So I just continued on that path. I didn't really know where it would lead. I didn't know it would lead to this room in Armenia. I just followed it. And then my observation about storytelling and human emotion is just, maybe it's because I've become a storyteller and I've seen, what film is in the world, and how important it is for people, that I've focused on that and created that story. I mean, we all are constantly creating stories about who we are, what we are, where we're going, why everything is meaning. I talk about this in my first film, Pi. They're talking about a number, and the mentor says, oh, you can see that number there, you can see that number there, and it's true. As soon as you start thinking about something, you start seeing it everywhere. So It's just my fiction that I'm putting out into this world right now because it's happening.
Question here, please.
Some of your student films were comedies. Could you imagine writing and directing comedies in the future again?
How do you know they're comedies?
I wrote about it in the talks.
You read about it?
Yes.
Okay, good.
In your
As long as you haven't seen them.
No, unfortunately, I couldn't get it.
I started off doing comedy, and I like doing comedy. And it's funny because I think tragedy is the opposite of comedy. You know, how people say, when you laugh, it's the opposite of crying. You know, when you cry, you suck in, and when you laugh, you go out. Although some people do that backwards, and it sounds really weird. But I think I could do a comedy. I'm a little bit. I just haven't found one that's good. But my editor is like, do a comedy, please do a comedy. And many famous comedians have come to me to ask me to help them with comedy for some reason. So I don't know.
Yeah, please.
Mr.
Darren.
Yeah, no. Mr. Aronofsky, I'd like to ask you about Kirill Serebrennikov.
About what?
Kirill Serebrennikov, his case. Russian filmmaker.
Okay.
Yes. Many people think that his case is fabricated, and recently you have suggested to bring his valet, Nureyev, to New York. And I'd like to know your...
I don't know what's going on.
Nureyev, you're...
The home arrested? Russian?
Yeah.
I don't know about it.
Nureyev valet, you wrote on your Facebook.
Oh, you're talking about I thought you were talking about a film director. You're talking about the ballet director.
Yes, and the director, Kirill Serebrennikov, he was arrested.
Okay.
And I'd like to know your opinion about his arrest. And
I don't know much details about the situation. All I saw his Nureyev at the Bolshoi the other night, and it was amazing. So I don't know about the politics. I don't know anything about the politics.
Okay.
Or I don't know. I'm not even sure what's going on. So I can't comment.
Do you think that? One moment.
It was the answer that no comment.
I didn't say no comment. I actually, my comment is I actually don't know. I'm uninformed. So I'm not going to get into a political conversation if I don't know the information. I thought his ballet was beautiful, though. That's my answer. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Aronofsky, I can't sleep at night because I have one question. So, what is the yellow powder in the movie Mother?
Why? What do you think it is?
Because I think it's something very important, but I have no idea.
Some questions are... I guess you won't be sleeping tonight.
I hope so.
Sorry. I don't answer everything.
Question. Please pass the microphone.
There's a common belief that an artist cannot create something that is above of his experience, and I would like to ask you if you agree with this, and how this was how do you see this in your artwork?
An artist can create something out of his experience. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's a very good question, because I think that's completely wrong, and it's very upsetting because it's what's going on a lot right now. Because people are saying you can only make a film about this if you're about this, or you can make a film about this, and I think that's not right. I think we're all people, and I think everyone can feel everyone else's emotions. It's unifying, and I think that's the job as an artist, is to feel and to express love, and to sort of say, I don't think the human experience is really that different between people. And I think that if you sort of do your work, do your research, and really feel something, that you can have something to say. I think it's important to be aware that there's differences, but there's, I think, as many differences between each and every single person in this room as there is if you were sort of trying to separate people by their differences of gender or skin color or race or sex or age. I don't think that's what's interesting. I think what's interesting is what connects us all and what makes us all human. And you have, all different types of people have proved that's not the fact. You have incredible portraits of women, of men, of gay women, from all different types of people expressing it. And I think it's worth saying, hey, that person is this or that, and maybe that affects something, and you can analyze that and think about that. But to restrict what story you want to tell is, it's creating walls between people as opposed to unifying people.
So you're doing a research and then just created it, you don't have to feel the same thing as you're directing? Did I understand you?
No, I don't think so. I think if someone feels pain, I think, you can make a film about a dog and we're going to turn that animal into have human emotions. And those emotions are universal. We all feel them. We feel them in different reasons. We feel them in the same way for different reasons. But we do all feel the same. We just have to understand what the reasons are that people are feeling that way. But look, when I was in film school, I realized I had never made a film about a woman in my first 2 films in film school. They were male leads. And so my last project, I decided to make it about a female. And probably my most successful collaborations has been with Natalie Portman and Jennifer Lawrence and Ellen Burstyn and Michelle Pfeiffer. So, I'm not a woman, but I can sit there and I can work with this other artist and I can say, well, what do you think? The end of Black Swan wasn't quite making sense for us, and Natalie was like, it's got to be this. And she brought her spirit. It's collaboration. So it's people working together to get somewhere. So when you see a film that's authored by someone, there's a whole group of people working together to get to somewhere. And I think if you have the right collaboration, you could tell any human story that's ever happened.
Thanks. And there is a guy with a red hat. Yeah, please.
Darren Aronofsky, I can in English. Mr. Aronofsky, you are an atheist and you are now in first Christian country. What about your feelings in Armenia?
Can you repeat your question?
You are an atheist, but now you are in first Christian country. What about your feelings? How do you feel in Armenia now?
And I will ask to pass the microphone to the middle, that we can move to the left.
There's so much I could say, but I'll probably get in such trouble. So I will probably, it's way too complicated of a conversation to have in this meeting. But I'm completely honored to be welcomed by Armenia, and I'm very, very happy to be in this country and to be your guest. And I hope you have tolerance for people that have all different types of beliefs or non-beliefs.
There are some atheists in Armenia too.
Sure, more than you know.
There is a question with Pink Floyd.
Pink Floyd.
Please, yeah. Please move the microphone. Where is the microphone? No. Begin. We will give you. Sorry, we will give you later. Yeah. We will come to you. I will not forget you. Please, there's a Pink Floyd guy. Just please raise your hands that I can see, then I can pass.
Hi, Darren. I'm very curious about your opinion about the streaming services like Netflix or other stuff like that, and does it impact the industry? Obviously it is. I'm very curious to know your opinion about that, and have you ever considered doing an original series for that? Thank you.
Well, we have our first originals. We did our first original series actually on National Geographic. It's called One Strange Rock. It's a documentary that's a portrait of the planet. if anyone likes Planet Earth or Blue Planet, it's of that ilk, and it came out really good, and you can get it on, you can stream it right now. Look, the whole industry is changing, and it used to be that on TV you couldn't show mature material. Now you show less of that mature material in film, and you show it more on television. So I think a lot of the great dramatists and filmmakers are moving towards that because it's visually and creatively how they want to work. So it's changing, and I don't know exactly where it's all going to end up. I do think there's something amazing about the cinematic experience, about going into an audience with a bunch of strangers and seeing a movie. And the reality is, any of us who watch movies at home are sitting on at least one other screen, sometimes two other screens. And so the nice thing about going to the theater is we get a little bit more of your attention. So that's why I'll keep fighting for cinema.
Please, where is the microphone? Yeah. And okay, there is a guy on the back. Okay. And also, խնդրում եմ միկրոֆոնները հենց որ հարցը տալիս եք հետ վերադարձրեք, որ կարողանանք հեշտ վերաբերել։ Շնորհակալություն։
I've noticed that you just said that you try to take some conversation that's going on in a person's mind and translate it into an image, a film. So I'm wondering, how do you do that? Because it's so abstract. It's like you can imagine it in colors, in smells, in tastes, but somehow you manage to make a movie out of it, and not just in dialogue. These things just come out of your images. For example, in The Fountain, right? How the balloon just goes up, and then it explodes, and you can feel something along with music, the colors, the acting. So how do you find this perfect balance to create the thought in a material way?
I don't know, it's what I do. That's a job. Thank you, though. You know, it's a lot of piece. I mean, it's inch by inch, lots of little different types of work with everyone doing their contribution, and slowly but surely it comes together. But I think it all starts from, the unconscious, and I think, some people call it the muses, some people call it God, some people call it spirit, some people call it energy. But the most exciting thing about art is the moments when you're no longer there, when time disappears. And it's something that every artist in this room knows about. It's when, the separation between you and the craft is gone. And it's what we all work for. I've only had very few moments of it in my life, but it's what I strive for. It's what keeps me excited. And I think many of that stuff starts off with these whispers that are in your ear that you don't know where they're coming from. It's a feeling inside of you. And you just sort of follow that, and somehow you have to be bold and arrogant enough to say no to everybody who says no to you. And so many people say no to you, but you just got to keep going and keep going and keep going and pushing and pushing. And then you just have to realize it by putting a team together of fellow artists that can add to it and shape it and turn it into something more and more beautiful.
There's a question here.
What about, as we spoke about mythologies, heroes, and Bible, what about Batman? What happened with Batman I suppose that you had to shoot it, the Dark Knights, and then something gone? Or they scared that you were going to torture the characters? Something like that?
I got a phone call while working on Requiem for a Dream about working on Batman, and I started to work on it, but I just wanted to make The Fountain, and I kind of used The Fountain. I knew was this crazy, weird movie in 3 different time periods, and no one was going to make it. but I thought that they may let the guy who's going to direct Batman make it. So I made believe I wanted to make Batman so that they would allow me to make the Fountain. So what do you call it? There's a term for that, where you fake and bait and switch. Bait and switch, as we say. Thank you.
Please.
You have been interested in Armenia these days, quite interested in Armenian culture, and you spend some time exploring the country. Would you ever consider to shoot your future films in Armenia, or some shoot?
Sure, why not?
Thank you.
Next.
Պարոն Aronofsky, մենք ամեն օր բախվում ենք ինչ-որ արգելքների, սահմանափակումների, տաբուների, որ ուրիշներն են սահմանում մեզ համար, կամ գուցե նաև ինքներս մեզ համար ենք այդ արգելքները սահմանում։ Ինձ հետաքրքիր է ձեր կյանքում եւ կինոյում կան տաբուներ, որոնք սահմանել են ձեր համար ուրիշները, եւ տաբուներ, որոնք ինքներդ եք ձեր համար սահմանել։ Շնորհակալ եմ։
Taboos? That's the right word? I don't quite understand the question. I'm sorry. My limitations. Are there restrictions on? I mean, there's constantly restrictions in filmmaking. There's always restrictions as far as time. There's always restrictions as far as money, and then of course there's restrictions of your own creative powers, you know. So I call it, it's kind of the golden triangle of money, time, and creativity, and they all pull on each other. If you want more creativity, it costs more time and money. If you have more money, it pulls on the other. It's basically everything pulls on each other. So you're just trying to find the balance between all of those to make the best product that you can that's in front of you. I have no idea if that answers your question, but I'm going to give it a
Question was more about the taboos than restrictions, like the taboo. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what a taboo. I mean, my last movie, we ate a baby.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's kind of a taboo, right?
Yeah, normal for us.
It's normal for you eating babies? Okay, good. That's it.
Mr. Aronofsky, do you ever look back at the movies you directed and think you could have done something differently?
You asked a question earlier.
Yes.
Jeez, all right. At the other thing, right? Okay.
Two more.
I thought I was going crazy.
You have a follow-up.
Am I giving new answers, or are they the same answers? Some of them are the same, right? They're okay? All right, okay, good. Do I ever look back at my old movies?
And think you could have done something differently?
Yeah, I mean, I never look back because I think looking back is it's a waste of time. It's like vanity. It's staring at yourself in the mirror, and it's wrong. Staring at yourself on an Instagram photo, it's just not the right thing to do. So, but if I'm flipping through the channels and something comes on, it's extremely embarrassing. It's like looking at early poetry. You know, it's always embarrassing. But yeah, but then every once in a while I'll see something that I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. So. But I try to avoid looking at it because it is a waste of time.
I'm sorry, I should try to wait. Thanks so much. I have two questions. The first one, what kind of questions are you in love with to be asked?
What type of what?
Questions are you in love with to be asked during such kind of press conferences? And the second one, if you were present at one of your favorite film directors' press conference, what would be the question you will ask?
It's like postmodern questioning.
Thank you.
I don't know. I mean, I'm not that clever. That's a clever question, but I'm not that clever for an answer.
What kind of questions do you love to be asked?
What type of questions do I like to be asked? Do I love Armenia? Yes. What questions do I like? I mean, you know, I'm more into the compliments than into the questions.
Hello, Mr. Aronofsky. Since there was an unsuccessful prequel to this question before, let me put the question in that way. Given that there are stories of creation of man from clay, Would you say that the yellow powder in the movie is clay?
That's good. I think you work with that. It's good. I mean, it's there's many mysteries. There's supposed to be many mysteries, and if you keep thinking and looking, you'll figure it out. I promise you. Thank you, though.
Thank you very much.
Back row, one question, and then...
Okay.
I'm just asking again, when you have a question and finished your question, please pass the microphone immediately, that we will not wait for next. Thank you.
So, Mr. Aronofsky, I remember the first time I was watching Requiem for a Dream, and you know, I was having a mental conversation with, I didn't know you at that time, so I was having a mental conversation. Is this guy crazy? So, for me, it is very interesting. When you have the pen and the paper, when you're writing the script, are you having this mental conversation with your audience? In other way, do you really care for your audience?
Yeah. Of course, I mean, I think my mentor always told me he had a sign on his desk that said, "Where is my audience now?" And I think that's the hardest part about filmmaking, is when you're in the edit room and you're looking at the cut, trying to separate yourself from all the pain you went through to create an image, and to be able to look at the image and go, what is my audience, the first people who see this, thinking at this moment when this happens? So, you know, you have an incredible responsibility to your audience, and you have to constantly be in a conversation with your audience, and as soon as you stop having a conversation, you're alone in a room, insane. So it's all about a give and take.
There's a question here.
Mr. Aronofsky, I was wondering, how come you are drawn to such extreme curiosities of the mind?
Extreme curiosities of the mind.
Yes.
Curiosities of the mind. God, those are hard words you put together. Extreme curiosities of the mind. It's a bit heavy for me. I guess, yeah, I don't know about extreme curiosities, extreme situations of the mind, maybe. I'm not sure they're extreme, well, I guess in Pi they're kind of extreme curiosities. I don't know. I think get in there. It's a good question. But like, you know, when you watch one of these superhero films, right? You get this guy with like superpowers, and they have to figure out a way to make him or her almost die or lose, and then somehow through some type of goodness in them and cleverness, they're able to overcome the bad guy. And it's usually physical, right? When you watch most of those superhero films, it's like fist fights. Ultimately, they're like big, big fist fights. It's like Hulk versus Iron Man, and then it's purple guy versus the yellow guy, and then all that stuff, right? I think what I was always more interested in is putting that into people's heads, because I think that's what more people deal with, you know, in real life. That really what's going on for all of us is there's just a constant struggle of getting on with life, and all that internal monologue that's going on in your head is really fascinating. And what is amazing about filmmaking versus any other, except for literature, but pretty much any other type of art, is you can really bring an audience into the character's head, like Raskolnikov and Dostoevsky. You can really understand the struggle of humanity, and with filmmaking you can visualize that. So I think I'm trying to do the same battles that you see in most movies, but I think happening in people's heads. Is that a good answer?
T-shirt. Blue T-shirt, yeah.
Hello,
How are you? I like the whole thing.
All right, yeah, thank you so much. I have two questions. First of all, I want to ask the same. How are you now?
How am I now?
Yeah, after all these questions.
I'm good. It's a very friendly audience.
Yeah, great. Second,
last time they carried me out with pitchforks and tried to burn me.
Second is that I want to ask about the soundtrack of Requiem for a Dream, because I believe that soundtrack was one of the awesomest in the whole history of cinema. And did you order that before they created for you, or no? You asked because with the soundtrack of that film, you were more successful to transfer all the feeling to the audience.
Yeah, it's actually a really good story. So now Clint Mansell, the guy who wrote that, his first movie was Pi, Requiem, and he was a rock star before that. And his band had split up, and he was dating a woman I knew, and we became friendly, and I said, hey, would you write a song for Pi? He wrote one song, and it was really good, and I was like, oh, could you write another song? And then pretty much after a while, he became the composer, even though he didn't really know what it meant to be a composer at the time. And then we started working on Requiem, and I sent him the screenplay. He read the screenplay, and he actually just pumped out some music and put it on a CD and sent it to me. And it had some interesting sounds and stuff, but none of the scenes existed, so it didn't really mean anything. And then we made the movie, and we were getting into the editing, and he was living down in New Orleans, actually with Trent Reznor, not to be a name dropper, but that's pretty cool. And he was having a really hard time creating music, and he was thinking about quitting. So I flew down to New Orleans to hang out with him, and we were struggling, and I was trying to inspire him, and I said, hey, let's pull out that old CD you made. And we started working our way through the CD, and we heard that one thing that, that da-na, da-na-na-na, and it was just like 2-3 notes for a second. I was like, oh, that's good. What if we put that over this scene? And we were like, okay, that works. And then we slowly started to take the different pieces that he had created from his first moment of inspiration and place them in different places. And that gave him kind of the roadmap to develop it into what it became. And it's strange because that song, shows up everywhere now. And all I can say is Clint made a lot more money on that movie than I did.
Can we continue?
Sure, we'll do a couple more.
Yeah, there's.
You are a great inspiration for many young filmmakers and ordinary people, and for me as well. And it would be very interesting to know who was your inspiration when you were younger.
I mean, independent film was just starting when I was a filmmaker. There was a film, me and my friends were just watching Jim Jarmusch's movie, Stranger Than Paradise. And there was Spike Lee had made a few movies, but there really wasn't an independent film scene. When I started to get into filmmaking, I started to watch some of the great masters like Fellini and Kurosawa. And when I discovered their movies, I started to kind of grasp the power of cinema. So there's so much you can pull on in this world to be inspired, but go watch La Dolce Vita by Fellini and Yojimbo by Kurosawa. So that's your assignment for tonight.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, hello. So you've mentioned that making a film is like being in a marriage. So I'm curious to know if, as a starting director back in time, apart from professionalism, were there specific character traits that you were looking for in potential collaborators or crew members, and if those traits changed with time?
I mean, you're always looking for the same thing. You want to work with people who look at their craft as an art. And that art is storytelling. So basically you're looking for storytellers. You're looking for people who can understand stories. So when you interview someone, you want to make sure that they understand the story and that they can interpret the story through their craft. So if you have a costume designer, you want to make sure that they're thinking about costume in a narrative way, in a way that tells story. And then you can work with them. Because if they understand what a story is, then they can turn their own art into that story.
Okay, there's one
question. Last, you better be a good question.
One last.
Pressure's on.
Hi, Darren. I guess it's a question relating not specifically to your films, but
generally on the condition of filmmaking in America now, because you spoke earlier about the importance of working with women in your film, and I have to commend on the fantastic work you do with the actresses. But I'm wondering how this process has changed post Me Too movement in Hollywood, and how it has impacted your work specifically, or it hasn't. I mean, have things really changed?
I mean, things absolutely are changing, and it's a very positive movement in the States, and I hope there's ramifications around the world. I mean, my sets have always been very egalitarian. I grew up, my mother ran my household and my sister kicked my ass every day, so I grew up with two powerful women. And I'm a feminist, and I believe in the equality of all people on the planet. That's worth applause. And so, I don't think what happens on my sets have changed. Although, I'm sure there are things that, look, as a director, there's a huge mountain of people that are underneath you, and you can't actually know what every single is happening in every department, and I'm sure things have happened. But that behavior was never acceptable. And I've heard, since this has come out, so many stories that are unbelievable that are happening at the top of the pyramid between filmmakers and between filmmakers and crew and between actors. There's so much of that going on, and that's going to stop because finally there's a voice for it, and finally there's the knowledge that that is wrong, and you can't treat people like that, and that's good. That's good. It's over. That's done. You can't treat people like shit, and you can't take advantage of people because of their gender or because of their power. You have to treat people like equals. And so that's the positive of it, and I think things will change. It hasn't affected me or my art, and I'll just continue to keep making the work I want to make.
I need to ask Daniel if he has any closing question.
One final question. You're here visiting Armenia. What is the importance of travel, and does it feed into your work at all?
That's a very good question. I think travel is extremely important, and I grew up constantly. My parents, every summer, they would throw us in the back of a car, and we would drive without seatbelts, because seatbelts didn't exist back then, and they would drive us all the way across the United States and back, and we do that every summer. That was our family vacation, and since then I've always been traveling, and I've just been on the road with two very dear friends, and we had an incredible adventure and saw some very, very beautiful things, and hopefully that'll inspire me to do something new, and I can't wait to see some more of Armenia tomorrow and get some more inspiration. Thank you very much, everybody.